You know, we live in a world where visibility is mistaken for connection, where being noticed is confused with being understood, and nowhere is that more true than in the life of an attractive woman. From a very young age, an attractive girl begins to notice something strange about the way the world reacts to her. People smile more, doors open a little quicker, compliments come often, sometimes from strangers. There's an air of politeness around her, but it's not the kind that makes her feel safe. It's the kind that feels rehearsed, artificial, and deep down she begins to sense something unsettling. Most people aren't actually interacting with her. They're interacting with the idea of her. They see beauty, and instantly they attach a narrative. She's confident, she's got it easy, she's probably shallow, she must be high maintenance. Or worse, she's a challenge, a prize, a status symbol. Her identity becomes something people feel entitled to define before they ever hear her speak. And if she dares to step outside of that frame, to be messy, complicated, emotional, flawed, she's met not with understanding, but with confusion or contempt. You're too pretty to be sad. What do you have to complain about? As if beauty disqualifies her from being human. This constant projection builds a subtle but suffocating wall around her. It's not a physical isolation, but a psychological one. She's not lonely because people avoid her. She's lonely because nobody actually sees her. They see their desires, their insecurities, their fantasies reflected in her appearance. She's the canvas, they're the painters, and after a while she begins to lose track of where their stories end and her identity begins. Think about how exhausting that must be. Every conversation, every glance, every new interaction, filtered through this unspoken question, are they really interested in me? Or just the way I look? That question becomes a kind of quiet ache. It haunts her relationships, distorts her confidence, and chips away at the freedom most people take for granted. And here's the twisted irony. When she starts protecting herself, when she becomes guarded or reserved or selective, people label her as arrogant, cold, or hard to get. But they don't see the years it took for her to build that armor. They don't see the countless moments of disappointment, the subtle betrayals, the friendships that never went deep because no one ever asked about her thoughts, only her skincare routine. What's even more tragic is that many attractive women internalize this. They start to believe that their value really is only skin deep, and so they overcompensate. They either work tirelessly to prove they're more than just a pretty face, or they surrender to the role society has handed them, becoming exactly what people expect: performative, pleasing, silent. But inside, there's this hunger for depth, for meaning, for someone to truly look at them and say, I see you, not just your face, not just your body, you. And when that never comes, the pain is quiet, but it's profound, and no one talks about it, because who would sympathize with a woman everyone else envies? It's not considered valid pain. It's dismissed, minimized, as if beauty immunizes a person from suffering. But it doesn't. If anything, it amplifies a very specific kind of suffering, one rooted in being dehumanized while appearing to be adored. It's the paradox of being wanted by everyone, but known by no one. And that's the dark side. Attention is a strange thing. It feels like it should mean something, like it should be enough. And for attractive women, it often seems like they have it all. The glances, the compliments, the followers, the messages, the invitations. It never really stops. But what most people fail to understand is that attention isn't the same as respect. Not even close. In fact, the more physically attractive a woman is, the more likely she is to encounter attention that is completely divorced from any kind of regard for her as a full human being. People look, people want, people even obsess. But they rarely listen. They rarely care to know what's underneath the surface. It's like the moment she walks into a room, a silent agreement is made. She's beautiful. Therefore, she exists for our entertainment, for our pleasure, for our validation. That's the trade-off. She gets attention, but it's transactional, shallow, conditional. It's flattering at first. Of course it is. Who wouldn't enjoy being noticed? But over time, that constant stream of shallow validation begins to rot from the inside, because she starts to see the pattern, that most compliments come from the same place, desire, not admiration. That being wanted physically doesn't translate into being valued intellectually, emotionally, or spiritually. That people will line up to touch her, but very few will sit down to understand her. And that realization is devastating. Men, in particular, often get this part wrong. They think that attraction is enough, that their desire alone is a form of respect. But it isn't. Desire can be selfish, it can be invasive, it can be completely blind to the person it's directed at. And when a woman begins to see that most of the attention she receives is rooted in self-interest, not mutual connection, it breeds a very specific kind of fatigue. Not physical tiredness, but soul-level weariness. Because she's constantly having to filter, is this person here for me or for what I represent? Even in professional settings, this dynamic shows up. A brilliant woman might present a powerful idea in a meeting, only to have her appearance commented on afterward. Or she might be invited into a room, not for her skills, but to make the team look good. She becomes part of the aesthetic, not part of the leadership. And if she tries to assert herself, to demand respect equal to her male peers, she's often labeled as difficult, dramatic, or overly emotional. The moment she asks to be seen as more than her looks, she's punished for it. Among women, the tension can be just as intense. Attractive women are often viewed through a lens of suspicion, not solidarity. They are accused of using their beauty to get ahead, even when they're working twice as hard just to be taken seriously. They're resented, gossiped about, excluded from circles where real emotional connection could happen, simply because of how they look. And that leaves them caught in a double bind, loved for their image, but mistrusted for the same reason. This experience creates a deep inner conflict. She knows the world sees her beauty as an advantage. She's told to be grateful for it. But how do you stay grateful for something that keeps you trapped on the surface of your own life? How do you feel empowered by something that constantly overshadows your voice, your ideas, your pain? And so some attractive women begin to retreat. They tone themselves down. They hide parts of themselves, physically, emotionally, just to test if anyone will show up when the spotlight is turned off. Will they still care when the makeup's gone? When the lighting isn't perfect? When she talks about her fears, not her fitness routine? Too often, the answer is no. Respect is a completely different language than attention. Attention says, you please me. Respect says, you matter. Attention is loud, fast, and easy to get. Respect is quiet, deliberate, and rare. Attention wants your body. Respect honors your soul. And once a woman sees that difference clearly, it's hard to go back. The same compliments that once made her smile now make her flinch. The same stares that once made her feel powerful now make her feel small. Because now she knows what it means to be seen through, not seen into. In a world that teaches women to chase attention, it takes incredible strength to start craving respect instead. To say no to what flatters and yes to what fulfills. To stop performing and start being. Because that shift, while necessary, is incredibly lonely at first. It clears the room. It filters out the noise. But what's left behind is something real. Respect doesn't come from being looked at. It comes from being known. There's a silent pressure that follows attractive women wherever they go, and it's not just about looking good, it's about staying that way. The world doesn't just admire beauty, it demands that beauty remain flawless, permanent, untouched by time or stress or life itself. And when a woman is constantly being rewarded, judged, or rejected based on how she looks, her appearance becomes more than just a part of her. It becomes her currency, her shield, her cage. Most people don't realize how much psychological weight that creates. Imagine waking up every day knowing that your value in society feels tethered to how well you maintain the version of yourself that others find desirable. It's not about feeling beautiful anymore. It's about maintaining a kind of performance that's exhausting. The makeup isn't just about self-expression, it's about expectation. The workouts aren't just about health. They're about staying worthy. The selfies, the filters, the posing, it's all part of this unspoken contract. If you look good, we'll pay attention to you, but the moment you slip, we'll look away. This obsession with maintaining beauty turns into a quiet war against time. Aging becomes the enemy, wrinkles, weight gain, a bad skin day. Things that are completely natural for every human being start to feel like threats to her identity, because for so long her worth has been affirmed by how she looks, not who she is. So, any deviation from that ideal, any hint of decline, feels like losing herself, not because she believes beauty is all that matters, but because the world has constantly treated her like it is, and that creates anxiety most people don't talk about. Every mirror becomes a test. Every photo becomes a measurement. Every glance in public becomes a question. Do I still have it? That kind of insecurity doesn't stem from vanity. It comes from living in a culture that has convinced women their appearance is a form of survival. And the more attractive she is, the more extreme that expectation becomes. Even relationships can suffer under this pressure. If a woman has always been praised for her looks, there's this haunting fear. Would they still love me if I didn't look this way? It sounds dramatic, but it's real. She starts to question every connection, wondering if the affection is genuine or just a reaction to how she presents herself. And when someone says they love her, she doesn't always believe it, because deep down, she wonders if they're in love with the image, not the individual. This creates a constant internal balancing act. On one hand, she may enjoy beauty, express it, take pride in it. There's nothing wrong with that. But on the other hand, she's aware of how deeply the world fixates on it, how quickly it can become the only thing people see. So she tries to stay ahead of the curve. She invests in skincare, in clothes, in diets, in routines, not just to feel good, but to stay relevant. Because she knows the world forgets women fast when they no longer match the fantasy. And the worst part? If she ever admits this pressure aloud, she's dismissed. People laugh it off. Oh, poor you, must be hard being so beautiful. They mock the struggle as if it's not real. But it is real. It's the pressure of performing perfection 24/7, of being photographed, judged, compared, and criticized relentlessly, even when she's just trying to exist. It's the mental load of constantly thinking, do I still look good enough to be treated with kindness today? That kind of mental load wears down even the strongest women. It makes them hyper-aware, self-critical, and often deeply isolated. And ironically, the same beauty that made them feel powerful becomes the very thing that enslaves them. They don't feel seen anymore, they feel monitored. Their body isn't just theirs, it's public property. Something for people to comment on, dissect, approve, or reject. So, over time, some women begin to detach from it. Not out of rebellion, but out of necessity. They start to question the rules. They ask, who am I when I'm not performing? What do I offer when I stop playing the game? And slowly they try to build a life where value isn't based on appearances, but on truth, on character, on meaning. It's not an easy path. It's painful, messy, and often misunderstood. But it's also the beginning of real freedom. Because true beauty isn't about being flawless. It's about being real in a world that demands illusion. There's a hidden loneliness that comes with being admired for your beauty. It's the kind of isolation that doesn't announce itself loudly. It creeps in quietly, in the pauses of conversations, in the glances that don't linger on your eyes, in the relationships that feel more like projections than partnerships. And it often begins with the subtle but painful realization that people aren't really connecting with you. They're connecting with the idea of you. Attractive women often find themselves surrounded by people, yet deeply alone. There may be attention, even affection, but something always feels missing. Authentic connection isn't just about presence, it's about recognition. It's about being seen not just for what's on the outside, but for what's felt, thought, and carried within. And when someone is constantly admired for how they look, people often stop digging deeper. They assume they already know who she is, that she's confident, secure, happy, and has it easy. So they don't ask the deeper questions. They don't hold space for vulnerability. They just take the surface and run with it. This makes it incredibly hard to build trust. Because when people treat you like a prize, not a person, you start to question everyone's motives. You wonder who actually wants you and who just wants the validation of being close to someone beautiful, who actually values your mind, and who's just saying the right things to get close to your body. It creates this exhausting mental loop where every interaction feels like a test. Is this real? Or is this just another illusion? Over time, that constant skepticism becomes protective. She builds emotional walls, often without realizing it. She learns to smile politely, to charm when necessary, to play along just enough to keep the peace, but never fully open up. Because she's been burned too many times, used too many times, praised, adored, even worshipped, yet rarely understood. And so she starts keeping her truest self tucked away, not out of arrogance, but out of survival. What's worse is that the people around her rarely notice. To them, she seems fine. She's smiling, she's successful, she's got it all. But internally, she's starving for connection that doesn't feel conditional. She craves spaces where she doesn't have to prove herself, where she can just be, without being judged or desired or picked apart. She wants someone to ask her what keeps her up at night, not what shade of lipstick she's wearing. She wants someone to see the anxiety behind her eyes, not just the makeup above them. And most of all, she wants to be held not as a fantasy, but as a flawed, complex, growing human being. Friendships, too, can become difficult. Many attractive women talk about the jealousy or suspicion they face from others, especially other women. It's not always intentional, but it's there. The comments, the distancing, the subtle ways people make them feel like outsiders. So they end up with lots of acquaintances, lots of social interactions, but very few safe spaces. Very few people they can call at 2 a.m. when life feels unbearable. Few arms to collapse into when the performance gets too heavy. Even romantic relationships aren't safe from this distortion. Sometimes the men they attract are more in love with how others perceive them as a couple than with who she actually is. He doesn't want to walk beside her. He wants to show her off. She becomes a trophy, not a teammate. And at first it can feel flattering, but eventually the hollowness sets in. Because no one wants to be loved for someone else's ego. Everyone wants to be loved for their truth, their dreams, their fears, their pain, their purpose. And so, many attractive women begin to pull back, not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. They start seeking smaller, quieter moments, conversations that don't revolve around appearance, relationships that feel mutual, friendships that are built on shared values, not shared attention. They begin to unlearn the lie that beauty should be their main currency and start reclaiming the parts of themselves that were lost in all the noise. It's a painful journey, but a liberating one. Because once a woman starts choosing authenticity over admiration, her circle gets smaller, but her world gets real. She learns to recognize genuine energy. She develops a sharp sense for manipulation and projection. And she becomes fiercely protective of her peace. Not because she's jaded, but because she finally knows what it's like to be truly known. And she's no longer willing to settle for less. That kind of transformation doesn't always come with applause. In fact, it often confuses the very people who used to praise her. They don't understand why she's not as available, why she seems quieter, why she's not playing the same role anymore. But she knows. She knows she's finally coming home to herself. And in a world obsessed with appearances, there is nothing more powerful than a woman who chooses to be real.